Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to January's Cabinet meeting. I trust you all had a break over the Christmas period, and Happy New Year to everyone. It's still late to say that on the 18th of January. Item 1 is the notice of recording to inform everybody that this meeting will be webcast. There are subsequent broadcasts on the Council's YouTube site, and all people present are entitled to take photographs or record the meeting. Apologies, I've had two apologies, one from Councillor Boyd Hamilton, the other from Councillor Shabrana Hussain, who unfortunately has contracted COVID virus on Twitter. Best wishes are with her for the next few days. Are there any other apologies?
Oh, sorry, Councillor.
Councillor, okay. We'll note those three apologies then. Declarations of interest. Anybody wishing to declare interest in respect to today's agenda? Okay. Item 4 then is exempt information and possible exclusion of present public. We have two exempt appendices in respect of items 5 and 12. Does anyone wish to write anything on those appendices?
Item 5 probably will need to go into private session.
Okay, in which case then we will take item 5 at the end of the agenda. Where we'll go into private session and we'll return to public session to make the decisions on that report. Okay, item 6 then is increasing contract value, financial reporting, delivery support, technical and strategic advice contract.
Just nicely named, thank you, Leader. Yes, so what we're essentially asking for here is Cabinet to approve the increase in value of the financial reporting, delivery support, technical and strategic advice contract with KPMG by 234,000, as outlined in the report. A 2-year contract was awarded for the provision of financial reporting support, which commenced on 1st of February 2021. The services provided have so far successfully produced a statement of accounts 1 month earlier than the statutory deadline and supported the audit of accounts. However, additional requirements have emerged from the external auditor have required to respond to an increased volume of external audit. More evidence. This is now there are fewer resources available for delivery support being required towards the latter part of the contract to ensure robust financial reporting can be delivered under the new council, under the council's new whole financial system. So everyone's aware we're moving over. It is thus necessary to increase the contract value to recognise the additional resources required to meet the increased audit requirements.
Thanks very much.
Just back to take any questions.
Okay, let's start up with you.
Thanks very much, Ian. I think that sort of looking at this with a bit of surprise, I think the original procurement notice that came out in January 2019 said the contract would be placed for around £400,000. It was ended up placed with KPMG for £476,000, and here we are, sort of 8 months or so later, and we're looking for an increase of £234,000. This is a 49% increase in the contract. Maths isn't correct, and that's an important number because under the Public Contracts Regulations 2015 Regulation 72, it prevents a council from extending a contract where the value is above 50%. So it's a handy 49%, this one. But I'm just intrigued to find out what actually has changed in the legislation in the last 8 months that has meant that what was deemed sufficient in February last year is now changed sufficiently to mean a 49% increase in the cost of the contract.
Well, I think that is set out in paragraph 3.5. Let's see if there are any questions or queries.
No, I think you're right. It is set out in paragraph 3.5. I mean, at the heart of this, there has been an increased focus on auditing local governments, not surprisingly, given some of the issues around places like Hamptonshire, Croydon, etc., where there's been substantial failings, there's been substantial failings in the local authorities, and there's questions raised about the processes around them. So there is an increased focus on audit, and as a result of which the workload has increased on local authorities. And obviously, given the size and complexity of what we do in Birmingham, that has significant implications for us, hence the requirement for increased support. And we don't have the internal resource to meet all those, especially when it's highly specialised and technical work as well. I'm not going, Becky, you want to add anything to
Yeah,
that?
I'm quite happy to close the chapter. And I think it might just be helpful to give some examples of sort of increase in work. So central government issued new regulations to the National Audit Office on what they had expected from internal and external auditors, which basically increased their work by 60%. That's the increase in external audit work, which of course then has knock-on effects to us because they are asking an awful lot more of us. So, and this is all around value for money building. Regulations have changed. There's no longer a pass or fail as to, recommendations as goes to value for money element of the audit. And so the focus is broadened much more. The external auditors have to complete a whole narrative report, which we're pushing more for at the moment. So that's overdue. So the sorts of areas they're looking at, and remember this is the audit for financial year 2021, and anything that comes in that happens before they sign their annual financial report, which is what the official title is, up until they sign it. So there's new things happening all the time. So the longer it takes to sign that, for them to sign it off, the more they have to look at. The sorts of areas that they're looking at, which you'd expect, things like the Commonwealth Games, the high risk BFI scheme, anything to do with waste service, stability, of leadership in the organisation at officer level. Those are their main areas of focus, and the work is still happening. So the more they ask of us, the more we have to rush around and get them information. And so our work is also gone up.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, these are the standard reports, the annual reports published every year to review report both council tax base, business rates, income for the next financial year, ahead of its formal approval. So the government, so in terms of business rates, government announced its decision to freeze business rates multipliers 22 to 22.3. Local authorities will be fully compensated for the decision, and this has been reflected in the report. Further, in the autumn 2021 budget, the government announced a 50% relief of business rate bills for eligible retail, hospitality and leisure properties up to £110,000 per business. An estimate of 62.8 million, excluding the enterprise zone, will be included in the next financial year's business rate forecast. Although detailed guidance notes to scheme are yet to be published by government, local authorities will be compensated by additional Section 31 grants. The Council's total projected retained income for 22-23 from business rates is expected to be 352 million. This is a decrease of 66.1 million when compared to 21-22. This largely relates to the reduction in the gross rate yield due to COVID-19 and additional retail reliefs. In addition, the Council expects to receive compensatory grants of 140 million, which is an increase of 85 million when compared to 21-22. This is largely due to compensation for the retail reliefs and the government's decision to freeze the business rate multiplier. It is recommended the collection rate for 22-23 is adjusted to 97%, which is better than 96% assumed in 21-22, but lower than 98%, which we assumed prior to COVID-19. Because whilst collection is gradually improving, the impact of the COVID pandemic and the economic uncertainty is still ongoing. It is prudent for the Council to make an assumption about the level of successful appeals made each year against the rateable value of properties and set aside adequate provisions for repaying appeals. The Council is assuming these will be 21.9, an increase of 4.25 million from the 21-22 budget due to an increase in appeals in 21-22.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions on this? No, we agree recommendation to one more, please. Thank you. We'll move on to the second one, which is the council tax base.
Thanks, Leader. So again, similar report. Council tax base for Birmingham is calculated at 258,000 approximately Bandy equivalent properties for 22-23, compared to 253,995 for 21-22. The increase of just over 4,000 largely relates to an increase in the number of properties, a lower assumed non-collection rate and lower student exemptions, offset by a slight increase in council tax support. It is recommended that the collection rate for 22-23 is adjusted to 96.85, which is 0.25% better than 21-26, but lower than the pre-COVID level of 97.1. Again, similar things apply in terms of economic uncertainty and the impact of the COVID pandemic on our collection rate. In addition, the collection of outstanding council tax support debts is expected to improve the collection rate, and this has been taken into account in the adjusted collection rate. The level of council tax support is assumed to be in line with current levels, which is a marginal increase when compared to the 21-22 tax rates.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on this? The recommendation was approving the council tax base for Newcastle Parish Council and Sutton Court Town Council. So can we agree with recommendations 2 to 4? Moving. Thank you. Moving on then to item 9, which is the City Centre Public Space Protection Order. John.
Thanks, Leader. This report asks Cabinet to give approval to a public space protection order aimed at tackling issues of antisocial behaviour in the city centre, and it follows an extensive consultation with partners, residents, businesses and visitors to the city centre as well. You can see the full details of the area to be covered in the map at Appendix 2, but effectively it covers the whole of the city centre from 5 ways and broad streets across to Snow Hill and Digbeth. These proposals were drawn up by local partners and the police, represented through the City Centre Local Partnership Delivery Group. It's based upon the evidence that was presented to them, and it's been the subject of considerable discussion and analysis by that group, in addition to the formal 6-week consultation process we undertook from November last year. And as you can see from the report, in addition to having the support of the LPDG partners, the proposals have been broadly supported by the overwhelming majority of respondents to this consultation. The detailed conditions you can find in Appendix 4, but in essence it's focused on preventing 3 things: individuals or groups causing disorder, harassment, nuisance or distress to others, being under the influence of an intoxicating substance and or alcohol whilst in a public place, and damage or disruption of property through graffiti. If the order is approved today, it will then last for a period of 3 years. I'd also just like to take this opportunity to reassure those who raised some wholly understandable concerns over the potential for this order to have a negative or unfair effect upon those who are vulnerable or in need of support. I've always been clear throughout this that our approach in Birmingham is always to offer the hand of friendship and support first, and we listen very closely to the advice that we've been given by our partners in the homelessness, the drug and alcohol and mental health support sectors, including the organisations this council commissions to provide outreach and other forms of support. If you look at section 4.9 of the report, you'll see that we have a very effective partnership tasking group which will be using, brings together all of our commission services, the police and the community safety team, to ensure that the needs and interests of vulnerable people are properly supported, and that we take enforcement action when it's absolutely necessary and with the agreement of our support services. So our approach to these matters must and will be just and proportionate and reflect the need to ensure that our city centre is a safe and enjoyable place for every citizen, whether they live here, work here, or just one of the many hundreds of thousands who we know visit each year. And this order will help to ensure that remains the case, together with the other steps that we've been taking, including, of course, the proposals to strengthen the CCTV network that we agreed at Cabinet last month. So with that, we'll move the report.
Thank you very much. Take some questions. So, John.
Thank you. I read this with interest. I think you're right that there are pathways in here to support vulnerable people who may be identified as part of this process. Can you just give us assurance that it's quite clear there won't be negative consequences in the sense of homeless people being dispersed from the city centre because of overzealous application of PSPR, that those pathways will be effective and always work?
Thanks very much. I think the words that John used there was "we'll take action when we need to." I think this is about 3 years too late. I think that we welcome its introduction, but would have liked to see it brought in sooner. I think residents, businesses, police have been very keen to see this introduced. There's been a knock-on effect. I think whilst this has been delayed introduction, some of the public space protection orders elsewhere in the city have been held up as well. And so whilst we welcome it, it's just a shame that it wasn't here sooner. Thanks very much.
Well, I think just if I can respond to that first of all, I think misunderstand the amount of work that's gone on here to ensure that this measure is both correct one, it's proportionate and it is balanced. And there's been a lot of hard work done by John, first of all, but also officers in the City Council, the police, and indeed the council's partners in the city centre to ensure that we have achieved that balanced and proportionate approach. And that's why this has taken some time to come forward. There were intentions to have introduced the PSPO for the city centre dealing with these issues some years ago, but it was right in my view to take the extra time to go back out, consult again with partners around the city to ensure we did get the correct, proportionate, balanced approach that we see in this report. John.
Yeah, thanks. Lee. That is indeed the case. And of course, as we were embarked on that process of engaging with our partners, the small matter of unprecedented global pandemic broke out, which of course then led to a whole series of other issues around the city centre. So we've been working at pace to do this. We've worked being closely with those partners and stakeholders. And the point around PSPOs in this city is that we ensure that they are evidence-led and led by those local partnership delivery groups. So I don't accept the suggestion that what's been happening around the city centre one has then led to delays with other PSPOs. The fact is that they are evidence-led and based on those partnership conversations. As Councillor Hunt, I'm absolutely want to give you the assurance that we're going to look at that issue around dispersal very carefully. That's been considered throughout. That's been part of those conversations that we've had with partners. So we want to ensure that the partnership tasking approach that we have in place does not result in displacement to other parts of the city and that kind of behaviour. So that will be continually monitored, and I'm also ensuring that there's a full quality impact assessment around this as well. So we've got those assurances in place. We've got really strong partnerships with our frontline outreach organisations, and we'll deploy those to ensure that people get the help they need and we don't just result in moving problems elsewhere out of the city centre.
Okay.
Thank you. Notwithstanding the extensive consultations taking place with partners, and it's really important to get behind this application. It's never been more vital for our city centre to be a safe, clean place for people to come and see, for our visitors. The eyes of the world are going to be on our city this year with the Commonwealth Games, and it's important that people feel comfortable coming in, and that we can continue to make and build on that investment that we're going to have insurance for that investment really, really important for the next couple of years in our city to get our economy back on track. Thank you.
Just quickly, thanks very much. I hear what you're saying, but I think that Erdington's public space protection order is going ahead now, but that was held up during this. Hardbourne's, I don't know what even is happening for that. I remember in 2019 I was making representations on behalf of Erdington and Hardbourne regarding their public space protection orders. An officer briefing that I had in 2019, the officer informed me that whilst the police had done a sweep of the city centre, that they'd found 2 convicted sex offenders who were hiding out in plain sight in this area. And so I can't help but feel that if this had been brought in sooner, Erdington and Hardbourne would have their public space protection orders there, and the city could potentially be in a safer place.
Well, I'm not sure that's correct, because we've been working with police throughout this process. John?
Just to respond to that, it's not the case that Erdington's was held up by the city centre issues. The Erdington one was subject to local discussion between police and partners. Those are the issues. With regard to Hardbourne, the Hardbourne one was actually withdrawn because the police said that it was no longer necessary.
Thank you. I think we should also place on record thanks to officers of the council, the police and partners in the city centre have all committed considerable time to ensure that we have got the right balance and the right amount of proportionality in this PSPO. So can we agree recommendations 2.1 and 2.2? Thank you. Moving on then to item 10, the focused on visit to children's social care. Karen.
Thank you. So this report is just for noting, and it is just giving an update really on the focus visit that we had, which was a 2-day visit last year in October, and it has shown improvements and continue to be made, and I think that's testament to the leadership over at the Children's Trust. That's both Andy Coldrick and also Andrew Christie, and of course our highly committed, dedicated staff that we have over there. Alongside the collective commitment from our partners as well that work with families, children, young people within this particular area. So it's evident that there's steady improvements and we're on that journey. It needs to be maintained. There was some small areas that we need to look at, but that happens with everywhere. And I just want to say a huge thank you to all the social workers particularly over the last 4 or 5 months, particularly when they've had a difficult time, where there've been people have been abusing our social workers across the piece, which isn't acceptable. And I do put a plea out to the public that we treat our social workers with the respect and support that they need, because they are doing an incredibly difficult job, particularly in the face of the pandemic as well. So yes, just wanted to really note this and get Cabinet's agreement that it's been noted and the letter. And also, once again, thank Andy and Andrew and everybody over the Trust for all their hard work that they continue to do for us.
Thanks so much, Sharon. John.
Thank you. There's clearly some very positive findings in this report. Could you just explain a bit about the use of unregistered children's homes, which is referred to in the report? I just find it surprising that unregistered children's homes get used anyway. Why aren't they registered?
I think there's an issue across the whole country when it comes to placements. That's known and noted. And actually, earlier on, a few months ago, I did write to the Secretary of State around the fact they need to look at unregistered places and make sure there's enough provision in the system and that we've got adequate funding to make sure those places are available. To date, we've not had a response to that letter, but it is something that the Trust are looking at. So Andy is looking at that over the Trust, and they are trying to, they're looking at measures and ways that we could possibly maybe bring it in-house. If possible, we don't know yet, but they are scoping that out. I think the best thing for me to do right now is to bring Sue in. She might want to elaborate on that point, because she's close to the detail.
Thank you. Sue.
Well, I think Andy's here, actually, Councillor Thompson, leader, and I think Andy's best placed to respond to that question. If that's okay, I'll hand over to him.
Thank you very much, Sue. And apologies, Andy, I hadn't spotted you on the screen. I don't know why not. You're smack bang in front of me, but there you go. So, Andy.
Thank you very much. So, there's a national challenge around placement sufficiency. Numbers, particularly of older young people coming into care, are growing. The regulatory regime means that providers of residential care in what is now a largely commercial environment are able to pick and choose carefully. And for youngsters with particularly challenging needs, such as those, for example, who require a secure bed for a period of time. For every secure bed that becomes available in the country, there are about 50 children being referred. So that's the context in which we endeavour to look after our children on behalf of the City Council as safely as we can. Sometimes we have to put arrangements together that keep a young person safe, but in an environment that doesn't have an Ofsted regulation. It happens all over the country. We keep it to an absolute minimum. When we do it, we report ourselves to Ofsted, so we're completely transparent about it. That's what leads to them, then when they come and examine our services, they make reference to it. Ofsted acknowledge that it's a national issue. They just want to make certain that the arrangements that we have, the supervision of those unregulated arrangements, and our efforts to bring them to a close as quickly as we can by moving young people on into regulated care in registered homes, that all of that process is overseen. And they concluded that largely it was, but just pointed us to make sure that we do the very best that we can. Thank you.
Thank you. You.
Thanks very much, and we welcome the progress that's shown in the report. Reading through on the letters, there was just some bits that I felt I probably should ask for more information on. On page 2 of the letter, it talks about quality assurance and management oversight of unregistered placements for 16 to 17-year-olds, statutory reviews when children experience unplanned placement breakdowns, timelines of personal advisor allocation for children transitioning to the leaving care service, taking up of return home interviews when children go missing from a care home, clarity when children's plans and reviews about what children and adolescent mental health services can delivered to children. And I want their quotes, by the way. I was
thinking we've all read the report.
Yeah, okay. On page 3 of the letter, it says when children talks about when children go missing and take up of return interviews, etc. And I just really want to get what what's being done to address this really? Because I think if we didn't ask those questions, we'd probably have just waved it all through it. We'd be missing an opportunity really.
Yeah, and I'll bring Andy back. Just to say, nobody's saying we're in a perfect state in this particular area. But what I think this letter is communicating to us is that we are making steady progress towards where we want to be in a few years' time. Andy.
So on the specific around return home interviews, the issue is that when a child in care goes missing and comes back, they'll generally will come back quite quickly, but our threshold for reporting them missing is much tighter than if it was me and my own child. So if they're due back into their placement, having had an evening with friends, and they're due back by 10, by 11 we'll be reporting them missing. And then when they come back, there'll be a conversation between their carer and the young person about where they've been and why they were late and how to avoid doing that again. The problem for us is a collection problem. That conversation takes place but doesn't get recorded, whereas we have a team of people whose job it is to contact young people in the community who go missing and offer them the opportunity to talk to somebody about where they might be. So we are closing that loophole in our process so that by the time Ofsted come back, we'll see a much higher level of reporting of recorded return home interviews for children in care. Did you want me to answer the other issues that were raised in the letter?
Yes, please, Andy.
So on the mental health service issue, this is an issue that we've got to work with Forward Thinking Birmingham about. So when a child in care is referred to Forward Thinking Birmingham, we need to make sure that the way they work is inclusive of a young person, their social worker and their carers, so that everybody connected to the young person is aware of what the plan of support and treatment is for that young person. That's not hitherto been the practice, so we'll work with them so that their practice will change. On the allocation of personal advisors, to be clear, our current arrangements are entirely in line with the statutory requirement. Ofsted and we acknowledge that if we can introduce a young person to their personal advisor earlier, then the transition towards independence for the young person is easier and smoother. We agree with that, and we're undertaking a piece of work in the Trust to look at all of those transition points in order to make them work better. On reviews when placements disrupt, we acknowledge that that's something we need to do more robustly. It happens, but it doesn't happen on every occasion. Probably important to set that in the context of the fact that our care population is more stable than it has ever been. We measure it in two ways. We measure it in terms of children who've had 3 or more placement moves in a year, and we have a very small percentage, around 5 or 6%. And it's measured in a second way, which is around children who've been in the care system for 2.5 years, who've been in the same placement for 2 years. And our performance is in the high 70s. So our care population is more stable than it's been in Birmingham for a very, very long time. When placements do end unexpectedly, we need to just make sure our system routinely picks up the disruption so that a review is held so that the new care plan with the new care arrangements for the young person are put in place swiftly. Did I forget any, Councillor?
No, I think you picked them all up there, Andy. Thank you very much. Bridget.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo Sharon's comments about the remarkable use of pulling this off in the midst of a pandemic, but also in a really challenging time for social workers. So I know they have had a very tough time with some of the national negative publicity following some of the tragedies that we've had. It is steady progress, and it is so pleasing to see. We shouldn't underestimate how hard won this progress is for our children. Just congratulations to echo Councillor Thompson's comments to everybody involved in it.
Thank you. Any further comments, Sharon? Okay, well, Andy, if you could take thanks back to all of the Trust, please, and on the Trust board for the steady progress that's indicated in this Ofsted letter. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Bring in recommendation 2.1, just to note the Ofsted visit. So, thank you. Item 11 is distribution of COVID-related grants and reliefs. Bridget?
Thank you. So this was not on the board plan because the rise of the Omicron variant was unseen, and we have been allocated a grant allocation from the government that we need to get out quickly. So those are the reasons for that not happening. Unlike other grant schemes, we do need to take this to Cabinet for permission to distribute under the Constitution, because we are not under emergency powers at this point in time. There are three parts to this. The first is around the Omicron grants to various businesses. These are set amounts that go to businesses for various reasons, and that is dictated by the government as to where those go. We have forms already on the website live for people to apply for them. Unlike previous grant rounds where we have asked you to apply once and then you have figured out what you are allocated at the council, I'm afraid we do have to ask businesses to apply again. That's not due to us, that's due to different regulations from the government around this grant scheme. But we do have the application form live in anticipation of approval from Cabinet, so we can go on grants once that is approved. Second part is around discretionary scheme. So that's 1.5 million funding is discretionary for council to award to businesses that have been particularly hard hit. The report asks for approval to delegate myself officers to find the scheme on that. We are consulting with our partners at the Chambers of Commerce and bids on how best to allocate that money to make sure that it goes to businesses that are particularly hard hit in this wave, but also to prioritise people who have potentially missed out on funding for various reasons in previous grant rounds. The third is around business rates. Way back in March last year, the government announced that it would be providing a business rate discount to businesses across the country. We got the guidance around that just before the new year. So again, this is seeking permission to crack on with putting those business rate discounts into place for the 21-22 year ahead of the billing cycle for 22-23. We appreciate the frustration on that, but we only got the guidance on that just before the new year. I just need to temper expectations on some of the grants. They are not of the size that businesses have been used to receiving in past funding rounds, and the 1.5 million of discretionary funding will not go as far as previous pots have. So it's just temper expectations on that ahead of application. I'm afraid there will be people disappointed who we would like to have given grants to. That have to take any questions.
Thanks very much. Any questions or comments, Jerry?
Just a comment, really, just to say that obviously welcome government money, and so for some businesses, travel agents and beauty industry, which employs, was it 1 in 60 people in the country, they generally don't own their own, they don't pay the business rate, they rent them. And so for people like that, they don't get the business grant. So any money going out to those will be welcome. But obviously, I share your thoughts. I'd like it to be more, but national person does say that. But
the beauty industry is one of the sectors that we specifically touched on during the comment. John.
Thank you. I understand you're still working through the criteria for the discretionary grants as additional resource grants. Could I request that perhaps those criteria be widely shared and publicised when they're decided for the sake of transparency? I think it's clearly a much trickier one this time round because it's working out those businesses which are marginally impacted and which are not covered in the present circumstances, whereas previously everybody was shut down and everybody needed support. So it's going to be a tricky one. But could we perhaps see the criteria when they're decided?
Thank you. Brilliant.
Yeah, so as you identify, there's certain businesses that have missed out in the past on mindful technicality, where they're not the direct rate payers. There's others where where things are closed, it's quite clear cut out the impact. The problem is that twilight where things aren't closed, but there are strong factors stopping people from going to use those businesses. So two industries in particular that we're looking at targeting for the discretionary grants are beauty and personal care industry, it's referred to, and the travel industry. We are testing that with our partners just to make sure that we've got that right. Absolutely, we'll be publishing the criteria for that following that consultation with business partners. And hoping to get this out the door. So we think we should be able to go live with the first payouts of grants later in the week. And again, there's a set window, the government has set for people to apply for this, so it will be a time limited thing. So I'll make sure briefly goes around councillors and please do publicise it far and wide. We want everyone learning to get they are due. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We agree then, recommendations 2, 1, 3 to 2, 3. Agree? 3 and 3. Item 12, planned procurement activities February through to April this year.
You know what I'm going to say, Leader. This is the council buying stuff, and this is the list of stuff what we have bought. So it's pretty more formally notes. We asked Cabinet to note the planned procurement activities and the chief officer delegation set out in the Constitution in the period February 2022 to April 2022 as detailed in Appendix 1.
Yeah, thanks very much. Well, it's obviously wouldn't think or miss without me mentioning something. 2 things I was going to mention, one of which I'll have to recap how I phrase it. The first one I noticed, Council House web streaming was on there. Obviously, you're going to expect me to mention that because obviously I've had some concerns about the sort of quality of what's been going out here since we left Council House. I'm just wondering what we get for our money in that contract that's been sort of discussed there. I mean, are we looking at something like we've got there, which is like looks like a Logitech Valley bar or something on top of that TV? I could buy it for about £3,000, but I'm sure the council will buy it in multiples of cost of that. But sort of, or are we looking at getting something similar to what we had before? Does this cover the chamber? And so are you looking at councillors sort of when they speak, it comes tagged to the face and says who they are and you get voting buttons with that? Or is it just like this? We've got one fixed camera at the back of the room that's just going to show everything. It was just interesting. Will it be Teams compatible and all this? And we have a working group looking at it later on this afternoon. So I was just wondering, is this preempting?
You might get all that detail.
Yeah, I think I might, but I was just wondering if this is preempting what the working group is going to do, or we're just going to be given a fait accompli. And where I'm going to choose my words a bit, because carefully, it was just the value for money bit, really, because I looked at the value of what this web streaming contract is, and then the item adjacent to it is IT consultancy for customer services. And if you look at those 2 numbers, one of which we're getting something tangible for, and the other one is we're just getting a service. There's nothing tangible coming out of that. And so it was just the sort of thing that, sort of back in the days, if I was sitting in a corporate boardroom, it would be mentioned that look at those two figures there, and so we're sure we're getting good value for money for that. So I didn't think I wouldn't be doing the council a disservice if I didn't echo some of those meetings I was in when I was younger and asked the same question.
Thank you.
Thanks. So yes, you are preempting the working group later. So this will be covering everything within the council house web streaming. So that's committee rooms, council chamber, so the in there is outdated as well. Very much got the focus on the sort of users. This is why you've got a working group to make sure that we get it right this time. And obviously some of the problems have been caused not by the kit, but by what we are plugging the kit into, so the state of the network overall. So I've made it clear to officers that's got to be in scope too. So please go to the working group and make your views known. And on the customer services side, that relates to work we have on paper came just before Christmas. So that is looking for work that advice essentially to meet some of the goals and aspirations that were within that paper, mainly largely about sorting out our website, making it possible to actually transact with us in an easy, modern way.
I thought you was a bit concerned that the cameras need to pick up his better side. Well, I'm sure
I haven't got
one. Just anything to that.
No, I just go in terms of the relative values, obviously about discussing the values themselves. I think it's a skills economy. I would say, and actually, if you want people with special skills, then the market at the moment is very expensive for special skills. Probably costs reflect that, not just in this area, it's a whole range of areas. So I think that is a trend you'll see and continue to see. Whereas the cost of hardware, largely thanks to our friends in Fargate, has remained fairly static over the last couple of decades, not long. Whereas I think obviously the skills market is certainly not. And I think just on that very classic stuff, I can make a little comment. I think the wonderful provision that was put on at Aston Villa, of course, being great sort of double works, you'd be surprised, but that really good provision we all enjoyed in the last City Council, I think is probably gives us an example of where we need to get to, I would suggest, in terms of our road capacity.
Other football teams are available. Recommendation 2.1. Thank you. Item 13, appointments to outside bodies. There were three listed on the appendice. The first one is City Centre Strategic Board, Councillor Debbie Clancy, to replace with Councillor Ewan Mackey. I sit on the City Centre Strategic Board, so I would just like to place on record my thanks to Councillor Clancy for her contribution to that board. Second one is the School Governor Nomination Committee, Councillor Mike Watson, replaced by Councillor Debbie Harris. And the Yard Grant Trust, Councillor Debbie Harris, to fill the vacancy that exists on the Yard Grant Trust. Can we agree those three recommendations? Agree?
Yeah.
You. Item 14 then is emergency decisions. This is to inform Cabinet of any emergency decisions taken by the Chief Executive in line with the provision made for such decisions in the Constitution. There have been two recently, both connected with the ongoing pandemic. The first was Adult Social Care Infection Control and Testing Fund, round 3. This was infection control and testing fund through a grant. Section 31 grant to support care providers to tackle the risk of COVID-19 infections and enable close contact visiting. This was an emergency decision because the conditions of the grant expected local authorities to transfer payments to providers within 20 working days, or as quickly as possible, and therefore did not have the time to wait before the Cabinet meeting was held on the 14th of December. Second one was summer, and that was in respect of workforce recruitment and retention fund. And the purpose of this fund was to support local authorities to address adult social care workforce capacity pressures. And it was an emergency decision for a similar reason that we need to begin spending that grant very, very quickly. So it's just to note those two decisions. They were, of course, the subject of consultation amongst the three group leaders. So we agree to note those then, at which point we will come back to agenda item 5, which is utilities procurement strategy and awards for April 2022 to March 2026. Just want to introduce the report before we take the executive council.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously fairly straightforwardly, this report is asking the Cabinet to approve the contract to West Mercia Energy Framework for a period of 4 years to purchase energy based on current market conditions. A significant spike in wholesale energy prices costs are currently estimated at 30 million per annum. And then it authorises the interim city solicitor to agree feasible documents in this recommendation. I'll give a little bit of background if I can, if you are familiar. So the West Mercia Energy Framework will be a sole supplier. The sole supplier under this framework, both electricity and gas, will be Total Energies Limited. West Mercia Energy is jointly owned by 4 local authorities, as the name suggests, which is Shropshire, Telford, Wrekin, Worcestershire and Herefordshire, and is governed by the joint committee of those local authorities. Securing approval of this procurement strategy will immediately allow WME to start purchasing the council's energy requirements for 2022 and beyond, which will mitigate further potential financial impact as a result of continued rises in energy prices. Going to the open market to source a single supplier for energy, as opposed to accessing a provider to manage our requirement, would put us on a yearly expensive fixed tariff, and we wouldn't benefit from any reductions in price throughout the year. The specific benefits of the WME framework is the range of flexible purchasing options offered and transparency regarding the purchasing and risk management strategies employed. The price of the current financial year is set in March and is capped with a traded within period option. WME do not purchase all the energy prior to the 1st of April, but purchase in blocks throughout the year in order to benefit from fluctuations in market price. Any surplus, as a result, will be returned to us, to BCC. Should prices throughout the year exceed the price cap, there will be no additional cost to the council. The ratio of energy purchased through the purchasing grants and purchase within period schemes is not fixed, thereby enabling WME to select whichever option provides the best value to BCC and any other local authority utilising the services at any given time.
Thank you. If there's no further comments then on that public sector report, I will formally move the resolution that in accordance with Regulation 4 of the Local Authorities Regulations Act 2012, the public may be excluded from the meeting during the consideration of the appendice, which has been designated as exempt. Is that agreed? Thank you. If you could turn off the live stream, please. Thank you very much. We have resolved the issue that arose on the appendix to this report. So, are there any other comments on the agenda? If not, can we agree then recommendations 2.1 and 2.2? Agree. Thank you. Item 15, other urgent business. Does anybody have urgent business? No? Well, thank you all very much. That concludes today's current meeting. Thank you.